Welcome back to the Beer Junkies. Today we are going to be brewing an apricot wheat beer. The apricot wheat beer has that bready, grainy backbone that you want in that wheat beer, but also has a very pleasant apricot flavor and aroma. The base beer itself is the same one that I use in my American wheat beer, which you can find in the comments or in that card I have up top. But just in case you haven't seen that one, I'm going to cover it all again. I'm going to cover the ingredients we use, the malts, the water profile, the yeast, the hops. I'm also going to talk about the puree that I use. I'll walk you through our process, the mashing, mash out, the sparge, the boil, the whirlpool, knockout, fermentation. At the very end, I'll walk you through that taste test. So let's get started. The water profile for our apricot wheat beer is 50 parts per million of calcium, 5 parts per million of sodium, 75 parts per million of sulfate, and 60 parts per million of chloride. To do that, I'm going to add calcium chloride, gypsum, and Epsom salt to both the mash water and the sparge water. Right now, I have the mash water heating up and filling up to the right temperature and volume. Once that gets ready, we're going to mash in, but before that, let's go over the grains we're going to be using. The grain bill for our apricot wheat beer is very, very simple. It's just 55 to 60% of a wheat malt and 40 to 45% of a pale malt. I do recommend adding about half a pound per 5 gallons of rice hulls. The wheat malt does not have the outer husk that malted barley does, so we want to add those rice hulls in to help stabilize our mash bed to prevent a stuck mash. But the mash water is all ready, so let's mash in. We just mashed in, so this is our mashing setup. We've got the wort pulled from the bottom of the mash tun through the false bottom, being pushed through our mash pump, through our Herms coil to maintain that temperature, and it is continuously recirculating to set up our grain bed filter. I mash this apricot wheat beer at 152 degrees for about 60 minutes. I do not employ a protein rest for this specific wheat beer because I do use a well-modified wheat malt, so I don't want to degrade the proteins any further because I do want to maintain that body and that head retention. So I do only do a single infusion. Right now I've got about 20 minutes left in the mash, but I will be back when it's time to mash out. We just finished mashing, so now we are mashing out, pulling the wort from the bottom of the mash tun, pushing it through our wort pump, through the Herms coil, but now the hot liquor tank is heating up to about 177 degrees, which will heat the mash tun up to about 168 degrees over the course of 15 minutes. Once that gets to about 168 degrees, we will begin to sparge. We just got to 168 degrees, so now we are sparging, pulling the wort from the bottom of the mash tun through the false bottom, pushing it through our wort pump, which is now directed towards the boil kettle, which is heating up and filling up. We are also pulling our sparge water from the hot liquor tank, pushing it through our water pump, and rinsing the residual sugars that are left in the grains. We just got to a boil, so we will boil the wort for 90 minutes. While this is boiling, let's go over the hops that we're going to be using. The hopping for our apricot wheat beer is very simple, just a single hop addition at the 60-minute mark with a clean bittering hop. You can use either Magnum, Mount Hood, or even one of the noble hop varieties like Middle Fruit. I like to keep the IBU to original gravity ratio at around 0.3 for this recipe. That comes out to about 16 IBUs worth. This will give us enough bitterness to balance the sweetness, but not so much that the beer itself is bitter. We just finished our boil, so now we are whirlpooling, pulling wort from the bottom of the boil kettle, pushing it through our pump into the tangential input. This will create a vortex inside of the boil kettle to pull all of the hops and proteins to the center so we do not push them over during knockout. We will whirlpool for 10 minutes, then turn that pump off and let it wind down for 10 minutes. We just finished the boil, so now we are knocking out, pulling wort from the bottom of the boil kettle, pushing it through our pump, through the heat exchanger. We are going through at just below 60, so I can speed it up a little bit. We are also injecting oxygen right there, and we are filling up that fermenter and pushing out all of the excess air. For the apricot wheat beer, I use the American Hefeweizen yeast from White Labs. I will pitch that at 62 degrees Fahrenheit and let it ferment there for about a week or until we're about 4 specific gravity points away from terminal gravity, at which point I will let it free rise up to 72 degrees for that diacetyl rest. I will hold it there for at least 24 hours, and at which point I will add potassium sorbate. I don't filter my beer, so I need to find a way to neutralize that yeast before adding in the sugars and that puree to make it that apricot wheat beer. So I will add that 24 hours before cold crashing. Now I will cold crash to 33 degrees. I will transfer it to the bright tank. As I'm transferring it to the bright tank, I will add in that apricot puree. I use apricot puree from Amaretti. I think they have excellent products, and I would recommend trying them. And I will give you my dosing suggestions in the comments below. But I will dose that on its way into the bright tank. I will carbonate the two together so that it mixes well. I'll carbonate it to about 2.5, 2.6 volumes. From there, I will keg it, and then it will be ready to be enjoyed immediately. And this is what we have. We have that hazy color from the proteins in the wheat. There's a slight orange tinge from that puree for the smell. The apricot comes through by far the most. It is most dominant. I don't get much of the malt or the hops. I get it a little bit more in the flavor. I get some of that breadiness on the end, but that apricot is definitely the dominant feature. It's not overpowering though. It is very refreshing. This would be a great early spring or late summer beer. We're over the age of 21. We do not condone underage drinking. Please drink responsibly. Cheers. If you would like to see more brewing content like this, make sure you click that subscribe button right below. And let me know what you'd like to see next in the comments. Cheers.